On the morning of January 6, 2021, Washington, D.C. awoke to what should have been a routine moment in American democracy. Members of Congress were scheduled to gather for a joint session to certify the results of the 2020 presidential election, a constitutional process that had occurred peacefully for more than 2 centuries. By the end of the day, the United States Capitol would be breached, lives would be lost, and the foundations of democratic trust would be shaken in a way not seen in modern history. This is Grimy Dates, and this is January 6th. This video is not about political sides, it's about history, accountability, and understanding how words, belief, and action converged on a single day with lasting consequences. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is intended for educational and historical purposes. The certification of electoral votes is typically ceremonial. Lawmakers assemble, objections are heard if submitted, votes are counted, and the result is finalized. It is not a debate over the outcome of an election, but the formal acknowledgement of it. But January 6, 2021 was not treated as ceremonial. In the weeks leading up to that day, repeated claims that the election had been stolen circulated widely despite being rejected by courts, election officials, and multiple recounts. These claims reshaped January 6th in the minds of many Americans, reframing it as a final chance to intervene rather than a routine step in the constitutional process. Thousands of people traveled to Washington, D.C., believing that democracy itself was at stake. By the morning of January 6, tens of thousands of people had gathered near the White House for what was promoted as the Save America rally. Many had arrived believing that the certification of the election could still be stopped. Shortly before noon, then President Donald Trump took the stage at the Ellipse. In his speech, Trump repeated claims that widespread voter fraud had occurred in the 2020 election, despite those claims having been dismissed by courts and state officials. He told the crowd that they would never take back our country with weakness and urged them to show strength. Trump criticized Republican lawmakers who had accepted the election results and focused particular attention on Vice President Mike Pence, who was constitutionally required to preside over the certification later that day. Trump told the crowd that Pence had the power to reject the electoral votes, a claim Pence himself and constitutional scholars had already stated was false. Throughout the speech, Trump framed January 6th as a decisive moment. He told supporters that if they did not fight like hell, they would not have a country anymore. The language emphasized urgency, betrayal, and action, reinforcing the belief among many in attendance that this was their last opportunity to intervene. Near the end of the speech, Trump instructed the crowd to move toward the Capitol, saying that they would walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and give lawmakers the kind of pride and boldness that they need. He also briefly stated that the supporters should protest peacefully, but the dominant themes of the speech focused on grievance and confrontation. As the rally concluded, thousands began moving east toward the Capitol. Chants echoed through the streets, flags waved. Some people carried signs and tactical gear. Others communicated through radios and messaging apps. The atmosphere shifted from political rally to something far more volatile. The march from the Ellipse to the Capitol took less than an hour. The consequences would last far longer. By approximately 12:50 p.m., the first barriers outside the Capitol grounds were breached. Capitol police officers, already understaffed and overwhelmed, struggled to hold back the growing crowd. As the joint session of Congress was underway inside, crowds surged up the steps, broke windows, and forced doors open. Lawmakers were abruptly informed that the building was no longer secure. Members of Congress were evacuated or barricaded inside rooms. Vice President Pence was rushed to a secure location. For the first time in modern history, the seat of American legislative power had been overtaken by a mob. Inside the building, scenes unfolded that shocked the world. Crowds roamed hallways, offices were ransacked, the Senate chamber was entered and occupied, furniture was overturned, police officers attempted to hold lines in narrow corridors as lawmakers sheltered nearby. For hours, the certification of the election was halted. This was not a protest, it was a breach. 5 people lost their lives in connection with the events of January 6, 2021. One of them, Ashley Babbitt, was fatally wounded by a U.S. Capitol police officer as she attempted to climb through a broken window leading to the secured area near lawmakers. The use of force was later ruled lawful. U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick lost his life the following day after suffering multiple strokes after responding to the violence. His loss of life was ruled natural but occurred in the line of duty. 3 others also lost their lives during the events of that day. Roseanne Boyland, who collapsed in the crowd inside the Capitol, Kevin Greason, who suffered a fatal heart attack on the Capitol grounds, and Benjamin Phillips, who lost his life from a stroke. In addition to these fatalities, more than 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and in the months that followed, several officers who responded to the attack later died by self-harm, highlighting the lasting toll of January 6th. As the Capitol was under siege, hours passed without a clear directive from the president to immediately stop the violence. At approximately 4:17 p.m., Trump released a video message urging people to go home and remain peaceful. In the same message, he repeated claims that the election had been stolen, and he told the crowd, "We love you, you're very special." By then, the damage had already been done. Later that evening, after the Capitol was cleared and reinforced by National Guard troops, lawmakers returned to the chamber. Broken glass littered the floors, doors had been smashed, the atmosphere was heavy and shaken, but the certification resumed. In the early hours of January 7, 2021, Congress formally certified the electoral votes, affirming Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. The process was completed, but the country was no longer the same. January 6th became one of the largest criminal investigations in U.S. history. More than 1,500 people were charged in connection with the attack. Hundreds were convicted of crimes ranging from trespassing to assault, obstruction of an official proceeding, and seditious conspiracy. A congressional investigation documented the events leading up to January 6th, failures in security planning, and the role of misinformation in fueling the attack. 4 years later, on January 20th, 2025, his first day back in office, President Donald Trump issued a sweeping clemency proclamation related to January 6th. The proclamation granted full, unconditional pardons to nearly all individuals convicted in connection with the Capitol breach. It also commuted the sentences of 14 individuals convicted of more serious charges, including seditious conspiracy, reducing their sentences to time served. The order directed the dismissal of pending indictments and resulted in the immediate release of individuals still in custody. The action affected approximately 1,500 cases. The pardon sparked intense national debate over accountability, the scope of presidential power, and the long-term consequences of January 6th, reopening questions that many believed had already been settled in courtrooms. History does not always arrive with clarity. Sometimes it unfolds live on camera. Sometimes it moves faster than understanding can keep up. And sometimes it leaves behind questions that linger long after the doors are repaired and the chambers restored. January 6th is one of those moments, not because of what was said inside the Capitol, but because of what was forced through its doors. This has been Grimy Dates. If you're still here, thank you for taking the time to sit with this story. These dates matter because the people involved mattered, and because understanding how history unfolds help us to recognize when it happens again. As always, if there's a date you think deserves to be remembered, examined, or revisited, leave it in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and take care of each other.